Okay, good evening. This is the UIMLA seminar that we're running this evening to introduce one of our partners who are called Linking Tourism Conservation. We're going to wait a couple of minutes just to let people join. There are people joining right now. We've got just coming up towards 100 people joining at the moment. And then we'll do some introductions and pass over to our partner from LT&C to talk about their organisation. So we're going to give that 2 minutes and then we'll start. There is a chat function, and I can see somebody's already started to comment in the chat. That's great. If you have questions, then there is also a Q&A function. That's somewhere maybe at the bottom of your screen. It certainly is on mine. And you should be able to type a question in there. We'll try and answer it inside the meeting, or if it's really complicated, we'll have to get back to you later. Okay. So hopefully I'm welcoming some people who are viewing this via Facebook. I'm not 100% sure that's working, so maybe they'll come and join us directly with the Zoom. We have also made the Zoom link available to everybody. So I'd like to say good evening again. Good evening and welcome. This is a UIMLA presentation with some of our partners, and our partner that we're talking to tonight is Linking Tourism and Conservation. For those of you that don't know me, which I think is probably most of you, my name is Ian Spare. I am the current president of UIMLA. I'm also a director of the British Association of International Mountain Leaders. I've been president for about 3 years now. And I have some number of years to go yet. I'm not sure exactly how many at the moment. So I just want to talk very quickly about UIMLA before I hand over to our presenters. So UIMLA right now is, for those of you that are not familiar, is 21 full member associations. And you can see that we have some good coverage now, not just in Europe, but we're in South America, in Argentina. We're also in Peru in South America, and recently we've had a member join us from Japan, which is a great pleasure. We also have in our pipeline another 6 aspirant countries. These aspirants are countries where we've either run an assessment or we have very advanced plans to run one. We have 6 of those, and again, you can see that this expansion from Europe is now occurring. So we have Chile, Bolivia, and Nepal. Our 2 most recent aspirant members are Greece and Bolivia, and I know for sure we have some guys from Greece on the call with us, so welcome. And we have Norway, who we have as a candidate country right now. UIMLA works in collaboration with some other organisations, and these are our key partnerships. We are an observer member of the UIAA, which is the International Climbing and Mountaineering Federation. Typically, that's a federation of national climbing federations. So, for example, Club Alpine Suisse here in Switzerland, the BMC in the UK, DAV, OAV, etc. They are full members. Alongside them are observer members, such as UIMLA, such as the IFMGA and ICAR. We are also recently a member of ICAR, which is the International Commission for Alpine Rescue. These 2 partnerships, the UIAA and ICAR, give us access to technical information and technical resources. And we work in collaboration, of course, with the IFMGA, and we have a joint statement with the IFMGA about how our awards work together. 2 of our recent partnerships are Mountain Safety Info. This is running through our partnership process at the moment, but many of you will have seen the event that we're running in a couple of weeks, in 1 week, which is part of that, and you should find out more in that event. And of course, here we have Linking Tourism and Conservation that we're talking about tonight. Very briefly, on the call tonight, you have Peter, who is our General Secretary, and myself, obviously. The other members of the executive haven't joined us this evening. Marianne, our new Vice President from Romania, Jitka, our treasurer from the Czech Republic, and Bill Bailey, who is a member of the Czech Association, but was formerly from Britain, of course. We also have a team of assessors. These are the guys that will go into the field and work with those aspirant countries to help them get their training up to the UIMLA standard. And A couple of them are remaining anonymous. They haven't sent me a photograph yet, but we have some great photos of the others. We're always trying to recruit to that pool. It's very difficult for us to find people that have the skills and the background for us to do that. So I'm going to halt my screen share right now, if I can figure out a way of doing that, and hand the screen back. I'm going to just ask our General Secretary, Peter, to mention for a few minutes the relationship that we're building here with LT&C.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ian. I have been notified that the Facebook Live broadcasting has stopped working. So
I will try and fix that.
Yeah, you might want to do that. Good. Linking tourism and conservation. UIMLA has become a member of LT&C during the last annual General Assembly, which was in November, which was obviously a virtual, a remote meeting. And you may wonder why UIMLA has become a member. Next line, yes, here it is. I have to rearrange my screens. Yeah. Of course, being outdoor enthusiasts, we IMLs, we value nature. We learn about it during our training as IML, during CPD events, and we happily involve our clients in the astonishing variety of nature. But we all know that nature is threatened and that we need to protect and conserve nature. However, protecting and conserving nature costs money, and that's where LT&C, linking tourism and conservation, sees a role for the tourists who, in case of mountainous environments, might be guided by IMLs like you, us, me. We, as IMLs, and I think that is essential, we need attractive nature in order to attract clients and provide them these back to nature experiences and the like. This is why UIMLA supports the work of linking tourism and conservation. And it's an honor for me to introduce to you Dr. Peter Prokosch, who will present the work of LT&C and who brought his colleague Julia Rollins from Berlin. Could I give the floor to you, please? Maybe, I'm not sure, Julia, whether you want to introduce yourself or leave that to Peter. Please take the floor.
I think Julia should do it herself.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. It's a great pleasure to join you here. My name's Julia Rollins. I'm based in Berlin, and I recently joined Linking Tourism and Conservation. I have a background in environmental governance, and LT&C is really all about how tourism can become a positive force for the environment and for the SDGs. But I'll pass over to Peter to tell you more about it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Now I thank Umbia very much that you are giving me a second chance to talk to your members after I had the pleasure at your annual general meeting. And I'm just sharing now my screen. I put together almost the same presentation I gave there, with the difference that I put in some more mountain LT&C examples as versus some marine, which we had earlier. I didn't change this cover photo, which has no mountains in it. But I know that mountains are on Earth, there are more untouched nature areas in mountain areas as anywhere else, almost, apart from ocean areas or the big chunks of rainforest we still have. But the mountain areas are often untouched because they are just difficult to get to or to change them into other landscapes. And I'm very happy that I can present you the more broad understanding what we want to do with linking tourism and conservation. If people talk about tourism, here's this thing. If one talks about tourism, one has probably mostly these pictures in mind. And although the Corona crisis has prevented for last year such pictures almost all over the world, but this is what most people are having in mind. And people don't know that often that tourism has also a very positive potential. At least the UN Tourism Organization is believing that tourism can actually support all the sustainable development goals, those 17 goals, the so-called SDGs, which the world has agreed in 2015 as goals which should be reached by 2030. This is in fact the most impressive decision the whole world has ever taken, and could basically the Bible for everyone on earth, because there's something in for everybody. Whether that's a country, a state, or an organization, a tour company, or an individual, everyone can find something among those 17 goals or the 169 sub-goals, the targets. They're very specific, they're measurable, and they all have to do with what the whole world agreed is essential to survive on Earth and to have a future we want. We from LT&C, and I have spent my whole life in nature conservation, believe that these green and blue goals, the preservation of water on Earth, the preservation of the protection of climate, and the protection of biodiversity on land, under the sea, are the most essential. If we don't reach to keep them safe, it is not so easy to have also the social goals in place. And without the social goals, you also not get so easily to the economical goals, which are on top. Therefore, you have this graphic here. For the biodiversity, the UN has an extra convention, the Convention on Biological Diversity, with its secretariat in Montreal in Canada. And they will just meet this year again to set up new goals, for which are also integrated in those SDGs. The last decade, or 15 years or 20 years even, they had this goal of setting up a global network of protected areas, which covers 10% of the marine environment and 17% of the terrestrial land. And this is directly also integrated in these SDGs 14 and 15. And LT&C is basically a support organization for this goal, which may change this year into a goal which we hope, and there are many countries in that direction which think that actually 30% of the world should be protected. There's an agency based in Britain, in England, in Cambridge, called the World Conservation Monitoring Center, which relates to the United Nations Environment Program, and IUCN. IUCN is the largest conservation body organization, which has both governments as well as non-governmental organizations involved. And they are responsible to monitor and map what is already there as protected area on the world. And as IUCN is also the organization which defines what is a protected area. There are different categories. It can be national parks, it can be biosphere reserves or strict reserves, small nature. There are at least eight categories. And when it comes to 2020, when this goal of 10 or 17% should have been reached, there's the assumption, and that will be looked at this COP15 of the CBD, that on land we have by numbers reached 17% about. But many of those are also paper parks and not really well managed. And on the sea, we are very much behind by without only 4 or 5% protected. What are the challenges and how tackle these? So I said already, there's a lack of marine protected areas. There are many paper parks. And there have been once calculated a number. If the world would have achieved this complete network of protected areas, and it would be all well managed, and local surrounding communities would benefit from them, all of that would cost about $30 billion per year. That was actually a figure which once triggered me to think about whether in what way this figure could be achieved. And I calculated already at that time that this is less than 0.5% of the world tourism turnover. And tourism is also the most beneficiary of national parks and protected areas. And there's also a figure which IUCN has produced that already only the national parks which exist on the world provide a revenue for tourism companies, for real estate companies, everything which is surrounding protected areas, of $600 billion US. So they need only to return 5% of this sum to get to the 30 billion and ideally support a complete protected area network. That was some of the starts why we established LT&C, to see this relationship. But other issues are that tourism or tourists are extremely interested in national parks or protected areas. More than 50% of all tourists which are traveling to a foreign country make use of protected areas. And the nature tourism is the most rapidly growing segment of all global tourism. So we have established linking tourism as and conservation as an organization and registered in Norway in 2014, and with the aim to show that there are positive examples in the world where tourism is actually directly supporting the establishment or the further positive development of protected areas. And this not only via finances, also politically support or education support. And I think there we are very much in your realm, can be of great importance for achieving this world goal of the United States, the United Nations. We have established a membership organization with different categories of members. We call our members penguins. You are in the second highest category of a member, a king penguin. Above them also only are emperor penguins, which are our founders and lifelong members. And if you go to our website, you find all these members on our map, and you can click on them and can see how they, who they are and what they're doing. Basically, linking tourism and conservation develops methods and tools and incentives for upgrading and replicating best examples of tourism supporting protected areas. We're promoting and educating best practice and making members producing synergy and cooperation. Basically, what our name says, we are a linking organization. And we have the privilege that our members are coming from both sides, from tourism as well as from conservation. And as you know, if you come from the tourism side, you often have a reservation towards conservationists, which you think they are just create their own territories and they don't want to see you there and restrict you from entering nice areas. And when you talk to conservationists, they are not fond of the tourists, which they think are just disturbing. But that there is a great potential for synergy, that they can support each other, complement each other. That is our job. And we have meanwhile found and profiled on our website 46 examples, which we call LT&C examples, which you can all read up on our website. Very different examples and very inspiring examples how actually tourism in very different ways can support and have done great activities towards creating protected areas. And therefore, I will go through a number of those examples, and I now have focused a little bit on those which have mountains, as you are most interested in mountains. It's actually the one of the most pristine areas with mountains on the world is Svalbard. Also, some people understand it as Spitsbergen. Spitsbergen is one of the main island of this archipelago. It's the northernmost area in the world where you so easily can just fly to and come to and explore it. And this is an area where wonderful cooperation of tourism organizations or companies and conservation organizations happened already in the 1990s, when they achieved, by just protesting against the first long distant road, that this should not destroy the wilderness, that Norway decided to make it a state goal to treat Svalbard as the best managed wilderness in the area in the world, and created new national parks, have created an environmental law and environmental fund where every tourist coming to Svalbard is paying into, and which is in a transparent way also explaining you where the money is used for. And out of that came also the cooperation of between tourism and conservation to develop Arctic tourism guidelines. That happened already in 1995. So that was one of the roots of tourism. When we come to this question, how can money go into protected areas? Then the entrance fees into national parks are the most common example in the world. But the problem is that in many cases, you don't know where this money is going to. It's not transparent. And in that way, it is of great importance to make that transparent and to look for examples where that happens. And in South Africa, the sand parks are a great example for that. All the southern, if you're looking at the South African national parks, the Kruger National Park and the Table Mountain National Parks are the most visited, and they earn the most money, so much money also from concessions, that they can finance the entire management of all other national parks in South Africa. And that is also directly explained to you if you enter one of these national parks. So that is one of our examples. Another great example of a tour company in Rwanda, which is related to a mountain area. It's to the Virunga mountain massif, which is shared by Uganda, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Rwanda, where you also find these mountain gorillas, and where both the gorillas as well as the national parks altogether are under severe pressure. And the visits of the gorillas is the last chance to protect them, actually, and which is functioning quite well. And these tour companies, or this particular one, plays a major role in all three countries, supporting these national parks with the gorillas and developing a great example how you can do that. Just a total different example, which is in Germany, and which is just showing how you can also influence people via education. That's the education center Königsstuhl in the Jasmund National Park on the island of Rügen. This area is used by at least 300,000 people per year. And the people are not coming necessarily because they know this is a national park. They are coming because these chalk cliffs are very famous through a romantic picture. and people want to go to this Königstuhl, this chalk cliff. And this is meanwhile so organized that you park your car outside the park and take a shuttle bus to the area, and then with your ticket you are channeled through this information center, which gives you a very sophisticated and very inspiring insight into wherefore we have national parks, not only this one, but also in general. And so more and more people which formerly have not really thought about nature conservation are educated and inspired in a way that they get at least more in this direction. Another example in this way where education and bringing people into the areas and make them aware what values the nature have are the treetop walks, towers which can be also climbed up with wheelchairs and for all people in circular spirals. They have been established in several cases, in several places in German national parks or other protected areas, and in some Eastern European parks. They are also one of our members. An organization which just recently came to us are the Friends of Wallacea, and they are related to an older organization and more academic organization which involves tourists as citizen science, people and volunteering and monitoring and supporting protected areas in many different parts of the world. And they have supplied also us with examples which they bring directly into Europe and other countries. Here's an example in Romania, which also includes mountain areas. They have another, that's not their example, but this is another example in Croatia. Just outside the Krka National Park, they have an education center where people can directly be practically involved in identifying species and monitoring populations of species and getting to know how they can concretely also contribute practically to support the surrounding and also the local community of this national park. I'm back here to Italy, which you know is also has some incredible mountain areas. The Abruzzen Mountain National Park is actually very well known, a very old national park, and the best case also where carnivores, wolves and bears are well protected, and where you have, in contrast to other countries, I can speak here for Norway or Germany, where you have major problems and political issues about wolves. Here you have an example how that can function together and how the local communities benefit from wolf and bear and other tourists which visit the area, and the local people are positive to these parks and the wolves. Here's an example of an indigenous peoples community in Canada, which have developed tourists which can watch grizzly bears and benefit and support with their income also the further development of protected areas in their surrounding. The country which has been done best and which is the best countrywide example of linking tourism and conservation is Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a Latin American country with rainforest habitats. Were also in the past on the track that their rainforest decreased rapidly. And then they came a decision of the president of Costa Rica once that they, on the one side, get rid of all military and also had no money to spend on military anymore, and put a major focus on preserving rainforests and building up ecotourism. And that is functioning so well that the country is now so much benefiting from that kind of economy, and at the same time could show that the rainforest and also some coastal protected areas are increasing, and also the coverage of rainforest is not decreasing but increasing in this country. South Georgia is a specific also a very interesting mountain area where tourists have solved the problem that once the Norwegian whalers have introduced not only reindeer but also rats and other wrong species for these areas. And these rats in particular, they endangered rare species of birds. And it was a huge work to be done to get rid of these rats. Happily, this mountain stretch of South Georgia is divided by glaciers, so it is segmented that you could go from one segment to the next one with costly helicopter help and to get rid of these rats. And that has been succeeded, and only succeeded because the visitors to South Georgia has been engaged through the South Georgia Trust to pay enormous amount of money and to finance these activities. So it's a great success story how tourists, which are first of all fascinated of these king penguins and other birds and mammals, get very clear that they very willingness to do something themselves to save this incredible magnificent area. So this just demonstrated. You can ask some more questions about the LT&C examples, but you find them all on our website, and they are well explained in what way they functioning. And our aim is, of course, and our challenge also, that we are not only having this and have profiled these examples, but that others learn from them and ideally replicate them. And that also those which have created these examples make an active step to find also partners or other destinations where they could export their model to. One way how we also like to make them more known is that we are cooperating with our tour company members, tour operators, in certain study tours, only to such tours, to such destinations which are LT&C examples, where we want the visitors to learn from those examples and then spread the word about these great experiences they made in these areas. So this is also something where we can directly relate to you, or where you as our member could also provide us with offers to our members, to our other members, to have study tours in areas which you or we have already found as declared as an LT&C example. An area where we have just last year been quite active by helping a Slovakian organization to improve the criteria and the guidelines and also the law on ecotourism in Slovakia is related to this free country area of what some people call them wolf mountains, which are shared by Poland, Slovakia, and the Ukraine. So that is an area of mountains where I wonder whether we also can see some connections to your organizations, and maybe some of you are already coming from that area. I just want to mention also, as the Himalaya and Nepal is one of the most incredible mountain areas in the world, that we have been also relationships to that area with not only supporting this Chitwan National Park, which is outside the mountains, but in the lowlands, but it is created by a tour company which does hiking tours into the mountains in the Sagarmatha National Park, for instance, and makes their tourists paying also for the anti-poaching activities in the national parks of Nepal. Antarctica, as where some of our penguin symbols are coming from, is also an area where we have seen tourism supporting new establishing protected areas, and where we are aiming for, and with our members and influencing countries, that a whole ring of marine protected areas will be established around Antarctica, which you see here. So I'm coming to an end. I explained you that we have 3 categories of membership. You are here in the middle one of being a king penguin, and the basic ones are royal penguins, which is a not so well-known penguin species which breeds on an island and archipelago south of Australia. And we have the emperor penguins. So with this last slide, we often encourage people to join, and you have joined already, and I think we should listen now and look at the chat. What questions your members have, and have a little discussion. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm not sure if you want to perhaps remove the screen share maybe. Yeah, that's super. So I think now you see our panel. We do have a couple of questions, and there was a couple of things that I was interested to know also. So from Tom Brody, who I happen to know is very close to me down just down in the valley, is asking if there are any tips for working with the authorities to change an endangered animal that is a perceived threat in a local environment into a tourist opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, there should be lots of opportunities for that, and we would be as we have the relationships to different government organizations and UN organizations, to facilitate meetings and talks to them. For instance, as the wolves are in Norway a major political issue, and there are very few people in Norway which would see the need that the Norwegian national parks, which are not fulfilling international criteria, all the national parks in Norway, you can hunt and fish and have your sheep and get rid of wolves and other carnivores. There is, just to give you a concrete example, there is one of the largest national parks in Europe, the Hardangervidda National Park, which has also a wild reindeer population. There's the leader of the National Park Center there, which has the idea that they should allow at least wolverines to come back into this national park, which could, instead of hunters, manage the reindeer population and to get rid of the sheep. So if we could help him to get to this vision, to get the Hardangervidda into that stage, we would need many supporters, particularly from tourist companies and those which are visiting the national park. And then we would certainly have an influence also on the government and could speak with the authorities, which we know very well, that one should actually do something here. So there are many examples, I think, which one could think of, where the cooperation and the communication which we could facilitate between governmental agencies and non-governmental organizations and tourism can function. A recent example where we actually helped to create the first marine protected area is the Ivory Coast, where this complementary cooperation of different levels of society has well functioned.
Yeah, I think that as mountain leaders, we're quite familiar with this conflict with wolves. And I know that Tom is here in Switzerland with me, and certainly in this local environment, we've seen the reintroduction of the protection dogs, for example, trying to manage that. I know that the wolf population here is doing pretty well actually, and spreading into some pretty surprising places. Yeah, we're starting to see that. We also have here in my own village a lynx as well. So we've had a couple of lynx wandering around the outskirts of the village. Tom, does that answer your question? Do you have a follow-up?
I think it begins to answer my question. I think what I'm trying to think about is a way of changing the local perception so that the wolf in our case, Ian, isn't just a threat, but it might be a way that we could generate revenue or generate interest so that the farmers see it as something that could be useful, not just a threat to their livestock. So, I mean, I know that's been done very successfully in New Zealand, say, for where the local communities run whale watching, for example, and the whale is no longer just something you kill and you know, as a resource, but it's something you go and look at in a way, and that's brought thousands of tourists to the South Island of New Zealand. But I'm not sure there's anything, and it's done in the UK. You've got wolf parks in the UK. There's one just on the outskirts of Gerrard's Cross. There's some in Scotland, but I'm not sure about. I've never heard of it in Norway. When I lived in Norway, the wolf was just a conflict. I never heard of any sort of wolf watching going on, and I've never heard of it here in Europe either. Sort of.
Where are you speaking from? Or which region are you referring to?
Well, I just never heard of it either. Well, I never heard of it in the wolf zones in Norway. The only thing I've heard of was sort of going up to look at the muskox in terms of that, but they're not so controversial.
No.
And I mean, I did reindeer watching myself up in the far north. So, you know, there's certainly opportunities there for animals that are maybe not seen as so much of a threat, but I don't know about ones like the wolf that are seen that create far more conflict.
Yeah, I mean, we probably Tom is actually physically here in Switzerland with me. We may have some Swiss people on the call, in fact, because it is interesting what has happened in Switzerland. My understanding as a Auslander, as a foreigner, is that this was the result of a referendum, and it was voted for basically by the population that these predators should come back into the environment with some pretty strict conditions. And I think people will perhaps be aware that there was a bear, for instance, that was shot a couple of years ago following that protocol because he'd become a threat. So the penalties are quite severe, but it is generally a success. And certainly the wolves, I mean, Tom is down in the Rhone Valley, so Tom will know that the wolves have penetrated the Rhone Valley from the Chablais now and have migratory routes from Grisson up above us, across the north end of Switzerland, down through the Jura, across into the Chablais, and back up again through the Rhone. So they're doing some pretty impressive journeys right now. If maybe somebody from Switzerland knows some more about that. Our interaction with them, Tom, I mean, I kind of, I've never thought about it before. It's very limited, isn't it? I'm not sure what we can do. I know that, for example, you could go and work with the people doing the protection dogs. And for you particularly, I don't know if you realize, but the guy that breeds the protection dogs is right here in this valley. He's in Le Fouilly. He has the contracts with the Canton Valais, I think, and Canton Vaud to train dogs to protect flocks. And that's considered to be a great success. The maths is a little bit unclear to me, but I know that after the original pilot, that was considered to be 100% effective, that the protection dogs deterred all predators from the flocks. And it's considered that they're pushing the predators into the higher mountain, who are now predating on the chamois and other local animals, moving them on and creating stronger herds and stronger groups. And that's something I think that was found in Yosemite as well, wasn't it? So if that answers your question, Tom, I might try and move on to another one. I posed a couple of questions to Peter myself, and I have this idea that mountain leaders are very often in the front line. We work in very fragile environments. I wonder what message we should give our clients. We are ambassadors for the environment, I think. I personally believe it may be our strongest and most important role. What should we say to our clients, particularly as they return from to travel now from COVID, because things have changed maybe, or should they change?
Yes, and this is also a certain chance we have with the Corona crisis. People at the moment cannot travel internationally so much, and they're much more exploring now their nearer surroundings and national areas, particularly here in the richer countries. You see that, and they are visiting increasingly national parks and protected areas as well. And many of them have not been so well being acquainted to nature, have been doing holidays in Mallorca or some other parts, and there's a chance to bring them and educate them and to tell them and inspire them about the nature, and that in the future also there will be more regional tourists, and if people are traveling far distant, that they should select it very carefully what they do there, and in a way that support also those pristine areas in the way. So the end of the Corona crisis can go two ways. There is certainly some people expecting that tourism is coming back to old magnitudes and is doing such as usual, or is even exploding further. And on the other side, there is a chance that people have thought much more in during this time about sustainability and what good tourism could do. And it is also, I experience so often that also individual tourists or general have people very much as a personal wish that they want to do something good. And one should make that possible. And if you are guiding tours in your fascinating mountain areas, you have all possibilities to inspire people and explain them on your concrete case why this is so valuable, why you should also contribute that this should be sustained for the longer future.
And do you think this will have a negative impact on some of the projects that your organisation's involved with and others? Do they rely on inbound travellers? And will a reduction in travel and people visiting some of these parks actually create a problem? Will there need to be a change in how these projects work?
Yes, I mean that tourists cannot travel to Africa anymore. Particularly in Africa, this can be a problem, and is a problem that some of the particular small and medium-sized tourism companies, they are really suffering, and they are very crucial for supporting national parks and preventing poaching and things like that. We're actually doing a webinar on that issue on the 21st of January. So if anyone is interested in that, we have a key person who works for the World Bank and who has concepts how to survive and make this biodiversity supporting small and medium-sized enterprises surviving, and also making them a little bit more independent also from international long distance tourism.
Okay, and I'll try and pick some of the questions up that have come into the chat. So Kevin Albin is saying the 30% protected area proposal has been touched on. I'm going to just let Kev talk. I think that's probably easiest. Kevin Albin, can you hear us?
I can indeed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ian. Peter, the proposal for taking 30% of the world as protected areas. There's some resistance, I understand, to this, in that it takes land already occupied by local people, which potentially would exclude them from their own land in order to make it a protected area. It's also argued that this land is probably best protected by local people because it's their investment as such. It's passed from generation to generation. It's they who've been there for a very long time. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of cases, and this is not so easy right away. But first of all, it's a important step that many countries are realizing that this is essential, that we are protecting major parts of our nature as we depend on that. But how to solve that in every individual case, that is something different. And there also, therefore, are different types of protected areas existing. And there are very good cases where people themselves have created their own areas and are getting involved. For example, the type of man and biosphere reserves, which are UNESCO certified examples. They can only be established if the local communities define themselves how they want to create this and how they benefit from that. They are called by UNESCO laboratories for SDGs, but which SDGs, and there can be also the social and economical SDGs in that region being involved, will be supported by that reserve, has to be decided by the local people. So that is one concept which one can use in these cases where you have involved, or where you're involving land which is occupied or in private hand, or where people have also different views on what in which way they want to protect. We have that discussion probably at the moment on the Lofoten areas, where there's a movement, there's a general movement where people, which is a very important fishery area, want to prevent this area from further oil exploration. So there's a major interest also by those which are fishing there, that these areas are not touched by oil development. And there you're sitting in a common seat and can develop an area where that is regulated in a way that sustainable fishery takes place, and in some other core zones, there's also a core national park involved, could also be more strict. But I guess
certainly.
Sorry.
So certainly, if local people are displaced because we are protecting the area, we've cut our nose off to spite our face, is the English expression.
Yeah, I know that there are cases like that happened in the past, and that these are always raised enormously, particularly by some of the rainforest organizations, where they normally that should not happen, and therefore there's a lot of consciousness, and nobody says that that should happen in this way. So it should be.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Kevin. It occurs to me listening to that perhaps the major thing that we should work on with our partnership with LT&C is to try and educate our leaders to understand those questions and be able to answer them themselves when we talk to our clients, because I think that is the sort of thing that I do get asked, and I don't think that I'm entirely competent to answer that, really. We can, I think that highlights quite an interesting area for us to cooperate, that we have this this army of leaders who are out in the world doing things. There are several thousand of us. We can do a lot of communication, I think. So I move on to another question. Ludovic has asked an interesting question. Are you working with the Alpine Convention, which I'm vaguely aware of? Do you have some knowledge of that and how you interact with it?
Yes, as I worked earlier with Grit Arendal, which is support organizations for the UN Environment Program. We have been also very much in contact with the Alpine and also the Carpathian Convention. So I know very well about it. And that's also an arena where we should see your work supporting this convention and what the details of this convention are aiming for.
Thanks very much. I think that's something that we should track, actually. We had an interesting question, part question, part comment, in fact, from...
there is, for instance, the concrete thing that the Carpathian Convention is not that well advanced than the Alpine Convention. And they could learn a lot from the experience of the Alpine Convention. There would be, for instance, exchange if your people are experiencing now the Alpine Convention, how that is functioning, how that has contributed positively. They could be involved in cooperation with their colleagues in the Carpathian region to transfer some of the good experiences.
Thank you. Yeah, that is interesting. Hannah Axon. Hi there, Hannah.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hi from Sweden. Neighboring Peter in Norway. Yeah, so my question is, or question/comment is about the climate impact. And since, I mean, climate is fundamental for biodiversity, and we need to bend the curve, and it's really urgent to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And can we then really justify long distance travels in order, or with like conservation projects? To me, aviation and this kind of long distance tourism is kind of easy picks when it comes to reducing emissions.
Yes, that's a very relevant point, which is many people are aware of. And we are not an organization supporting tourism in general or long-term tourism. And particular if you are doing tourism, but we are seeing that tourism is happening. And if it is happening, then the people should at least be aware of their emissions and do something. So the minimum they should do is that they should compensate that by supporting the project. And we have even actually concrete projects also on our website, which are certified, which are also both supporting biodiversity as well as climate. But Julia is also very much involved in climate and can probably also give an answer on this question.
I tend to agree with you. I recognize the dilemma. It's not easy, but as Peter said, we really are there to ensure that where tourism is happening, it's happening in a sustainable way and really benefiting the environment, the local communities, and hopefully making it a meaningful experience for those people involved. And coming back to an earlier point, I think, you know, the potential here for mountain leaders to really, share a meaningful experience that will have an impact on that individual, hopefully, you know, lifelong. So I think that's the kind of message that I would underline. But I totally share the concern about, you know, really responding adequately to the crises that we face right now.
Yeah, a totally wrong development which we see is that governments are supporting airlines, supporting big travel companies like TUI. That is the wrong direction, and that is not what we want.
And I think one thing that can be rather confusing for people if you're not read up on everything is when you have projects that go under ecotourism, and then if you look at that and look at the greenhouse gas emissions, I don't see that as ecotourism. So I guess that's something that everyone needs to push for, is to actually like include the whole footprint. And also, I mean, I totally agree, and I think you gave great responses that, I mean, tourism is happening, but I guess it's also important to be a bit inconvenient and also show the opportunities of, I mean, take the train or other things that are more low climate impact. So
and that's certainly something which Julia and our project in Germany will have a certain focus on that regional tourism and making people really aware.
Yeah, we really need a paradigm shift, and that's what we're looking at. How can we build an integrated response, and so that making the right choice is easier for people, because it is a lot about awareness, about education, and about individual responsibility and choice. But yeah, there's a big challenge ahead.
But I also observe and realize that if you ask individual persons, individual tourists, they always point to the other tourists which are doing bad in their eyes, and they they themselves, and they tell you, or they tell me, for instance, I often approach that as I'm traveling quite much, or have been done in conferences and things where we think it's necessary and needed. I have quite big footprint in that. And so I'm very often accused that people say, oh, you are traveling, and so you're not telling us that we should not travel. But you see that I think that does not make so much sense that people are pointing to each other. They should really think about what they can do best to do for the climate, and every individual have possibilities, whether they are doing something at the home. I, for instance, created a solar panel roof in my house, for instance, and compensating, of course, all my travel. So I try as much as possible. And also with my former with the organization I led earlier, we were the first climate neutral organization in the United Nations Environmental Climate Neutral Network. So I'm quite aware of all that, but it is, as Julia also said, it's a dilemma, it's a difficult issue. And I think also when we talk about tourism to Africa, it is not so easy to say that tourists should not travel to Africa. It has a lot of benefits, which one also needs to see.
Yeah, I think that echoes my earlier question about the way some of the projects work and the impact of travellers. Paul is also asking a very, very similar question, actually, which follows quite neatly on from that point. Paul, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, and hi, Peter. Hi, everybody. So as a business owner, every year I offset our carbon footprint, and where I can, I try to offset my clients' footprint on their behalf as well. Is there a similar? I do that through an agency who then invests that money into projects all over the world, from planting trees to providing other sustainable, funding other sustainable energy projects. Is there a similar way that, as a business owner, that I can invest in conservation in a straightforward way that allows me to essentially peg any profit that I make from a particular tourism region to reinvest that into conservation in that region as well?
Yeah, they're existing different, and that is exactly also what we wanted to do and wanted to provide our members with opportunities for. Therefore, we are cooperating with this climate company, South Pole, and we identified 2 projects which are highly certified, which one is in Zimbabwe, Kariba Red Plus, you find that on our website, and one in Guatemala, where directly also the planting of trees and preserving biodiversity is benefiting from that, as well as local communities. So there are these kind of projects that Julia also may know some more. We try at least to offer our members the best versions, and ask in our case to use these 2 examples which we have at the moment. You can find them on our website.
And how has your experience been, Paul, with this scheme? Do you find that your customers, your clients are happy to pay extra for offsetting, or is it just something they see as being an overhead?
I think it's the latter. My clients tend to be either high net worth individuals looking for sometimes ridiculous things, which I don't always accept, regardless of the potential income, because some of them are. I was asked, for example, to run a snowmobile event, and it didn't fit with the values of our company. So some of them don't really recognize it as a thing, and I just tell them that it's baked into their price, and I take straight out of the price of their trip that particular cost. And what I tend to do is then we'll offer something back as a corporate social responsibility report to them, particularly if they're a commercial client, where they can say, you know, we did this trip, it was a leadership experience or a team building event in the French Alps or whatever it is, and whilst we recognise its negative carbon impact, we have offset that carbon, and we try and do it plus, so in addition to whatever their footprint may have been. And it falls differently with different people, and sadly, very sadly, there are some clients who it just simply passes them by, and I would love to find, if it's not carbon they're interested in, there are those who are interested in flora and fauna or other things that perhaps flick the switch in a different way. So I think we need to find multiple ways of encouraging clients to recognize that their investment in tourism can be spent socially and effectively.
Is it always, to be devil's advocate, always reasonable to ask clients, travellers on their holidays, to consider these issues? Or I think there's a societal issue generally outside environment and conservation. Is everybody obliged to know everything about every activity that they're involved with?
That's a really good question. I could give you two answers to that. My business took a pause in March, along with lots of other people's. And I now find myself as the managing director of a COVID testing business, and we're working very closely with government. Government have just enshrined a policy that says all direct government tenders must show 20% social value as part of the winning and the competitive process in winning government tenders. I feel that there could be some legislation which would force tourists to recognize that a percentage of the money they spend on tourism must go to a social value project or enterprise, whether that be a conservation project or a carbon related project, whatever it may be. And I think if we could show direct lineage between the impact of the travel, the potential value that can bring in financial terms, I think it would have more political stability and have more political influence in us trying to drive through policies and legislation that might really make a difference.
Well, thank you very much. That is, yeah, it is interesting. Do you think that UIMLA should have a code of practice? Should we give guidance on this? We could give specific guidance and say, well, these are particular schemes that we support and that you could be involved with, or we could have a more generalized code of practice. Do you think that's a good direction, Paul?
I think either of those things would be really helpful. Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for the entire industry, but for me, if there were things that we can connect really clearly between the business output, the spend by the tourist, and then our certified union also pointing us at certified projects to deliver the best social value, I think that would be nothing but helpful.
Mm. Thanks very much. Yeah, I think maybe we'll talk again over the next weeks.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah.
I personally actually believe, after the world has decided on these 17 SDGs, that ideally only tourism should happen which is supporting in some way any of these SDGs. And one could certainly integrate that in some codes of conduct in your organization or other organizations, that you at least should have give more support and more preference to those kind of tourism, which can show that they are involved at least in helping that some of the 169 targets are reached. Many concrete possibilities. We are focusing here on the biodiversity and climate are actually also, from my point of view, the most important. But there are also others which are others people think are very, very relevant. And there's actually, if you look at those set of targets, there are possibilities for every person, every organization to do something good for those and identify at least where they are acting and where they're doing something.
Thanks. And we have one more question which has come in from George from our Greece Association. He's commenting or asking about the issue with wind turbines And he says in Greece there is a plan for more than 20,000 wind turbines to enter our important mountain areas and alpine zone, and they're afraid that the industry is slowly entering these natural areas, and that's going to have a very big impact on the natural environment and the professions of outdoor activities. So I think he's asking if what our view on that would be.
Yeah, there's also a very controversial discussion here in Norway about that. It's a very hot topic, and also there, I think to have national plannings which include the most pristine areas and exclude them from those buildings and other infrastructure is the best way to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that we've probably come towards the end of the questions. We've a few comments that have come into to the chat. Christelle comments that there's a wolf couple in her area. There is indeed, Christelle. It's the same area as I live in, so it's the same individuals. They are crossing backwards and forwards across the Rhone. So yeah, I'm aware of that. It's quite interesting. It's been a fantastic story to watch, in fact, actually. So I think we've come to the end of the questions, and we'll start to wrap up a little bit. The two messages that I've heard, which I think are interesting for UIMLA, are that our clients sometimes ask these very challenging questions about how their travel fits into environmental and conservation goals. And I personally don't feel very competent to answer those questions sometimes. So I think that perhaps we could try and do some more sessions like this, some more, and perhaps very focused to pick out particular issues, and bring in as many people as we can from our organization to kind of learn these answers themselves. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we could do, in my opinion. And the second thing that I've heard is that there might be some need for systematic action in terms of offsetting schemes, for example. And it's again very difficult for me to understand what is and what isn't a good scheme. And I read certain things in the press which lead me to believe that some are not as good as others, and it's very difficult to cut through how much of that is spin and how much of it is true. So some guidance would be, I think, vital for us to be able to do anything at all with that. I think that we're just simply not competent to do that. And I've also heard that there's several people on the call who clearly are very aware of these issues and very knowledgeable already. Yes. And I think that I can be asking them to help UIMLA with these things. This commitment, as I say, has been in our values, in our statute for many years. And for various reasons, we've lacked the resource and the focus to move on it. And I think now this should become a priority for us. That we are this army on the front line. We are interacting with clients all the time. In my opinion, the chief role that we have often is the interpreter of the environment and the spokesman and the advocate for it. And I think that that's something we can use more. So I'm not sure if Peter has any kind of end comments, either Peter for that matter.
I'm noticing one more question on the chat. Will the video be made available afterwards? Do we do that in our Facebook group, or?
Well, in fact, the video should still be in the Facebook group unless we delete it, I believe. That's my understanding of how that works. So I'm sorry for people watching on Facebook. You'll hear me say this in 20 seconds because it's slow. That's the first time we've tried to link that up, and it didn't work the first time, but it's running now. So yeah, for me, I'm quite happy to leave that there and to do future sessions and to do the same thing. Yeah.
So that answers your question, Alain. Peter, I think you have some announcements still after Peter has given his end message. Yeah. Peter, want to wrap up?
Thank you very much, and I'm very interested in all these questions and comments I see on the chat, and many are related to very specific areas and very specific problems which we could not touch into in this broad way. So you're very welcome to write directly also to me. I put here also on the chat my email address if you want to continue discussing that with a concrete issue which you may have. But I'm very much aware that you have and your members have this great potential to be, as you call it, ambassadors for the areas you're working in and where you want to also to sustain the natural values of those areas you're operating in.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And thank you for everybody for giving up their time this evening. I think that we would like to do more of these sessions and talk more to our members directly. I will just make a small advertisement for, I hope, the remaining sessions. Yeah, okay. So we have some more sessions running. You will know that there is a mountain safety session running next week on the 22nd. This is run by the very, very well-known Manuel Genschwein, who's probably the godfather of the modern avalanche transceiver. He was involved in developing the protocols that devices such as the Pulse or the Barivox run on. That will be happening on the 27th of January. There is information in the Facebook group on the web page, but your own national association should also have some details of that. This is based on a paper that Manuel gave to the International Snow Science Workshop a few years ago, and it's how to run a very quick session to impart some basic skills to clients. So very, very interesting for us, and a chance to find out what UIMLA is doing with mountain safety. Our colleagues in BAML, the British Association, are running a joint event with us by John Dallimore. The British guys here will know John well. He's a very well-known doctor, expedition medic. He will be running a session on hypothermia and cold injury, and that's on the 27th of January. Yes, that's correct. And again, it's on the website, it's on the Facebook page, and ask your national association. Consistently with this presentation, we're going to ask the UIAA Medical Commission to give a presentation on the work that they do and the resources that are available to us. So they do a lot of work on high altitude, for example. They've published some interesting guidance about COVID over the last 6 or 12 months. So there'll be a chance to ask questions of the experts there, and some UIAA people will join us. We are also going to ask some other UIAA commissions to make similar presentations on their work. And I think we'll invite Peter and Julia back for one of those at least, because we're asking the Mountain Protection Commission to talk to us about their projects and some opportunities for cooperation. So perhaps we can all cooperate between us. So that brings to an end this session. We have recorded it, and it's available immediately on Facebook, and we should probably publish it on our website if we can find a space to do that. So thank you very much for your patience with the technology, and thank you and good evening.